Hey traders! How's everyone doing today? Sam Shakespeare coming to you live. Welcome to the TrendBot Masterclass. Thanks for joining us. We have officially activated the TrendBot for everybody, for the lifetime, the lifers. It's not intended to be just a straight up trend tutorial. It's more of a TrendBot and VTA kind of tutorial, but you're going to get a lot of that trend training. It has to come with it. Alright, so let's look into our expert advisor's properties. I'll bring it over here. Let's start by just showing you, first of all, nothing will work if your master trade switch is off. So if this is false, the robot won't work, the VTA won't work. So to get the robot to work or the VTA to work, at least at the minimum, you have to have it turned on in your master trade switch. Okay. Right now I've got a few things turned off. I don't have any alerts on right now, which I might have to turn on the alerts for the trade room just to get okay, now you have to come to the bottom for the bot switches. Now, the only ones that are active are your 1, 5, 15 trend bots, and then your 5 and 15 minute stochastic. Oh, and also everybody gets the breakout box, so that's active too. So right now, this is what you got. Okay, the first 5 plus you have the breakout. Just trade on demo for a while. There's no hurry. So you want to get used to the market. You want to get used to using this in the market. It's not intended to do all of it for you. Okay, it just isn't. It's intended to give you alerts really for when the setup is right. And then I've gone a step further and made it auto enter and auto everything. But that, I'm still optimizing that portion. This is really an assistant to your own manual trading. So you may have to make up some pips some days the VTA doesn't work, or your job may be done for you, or you may wake up and you've got some open trades going that opened the session before you woke up or whatever, and now you're at your platform and there's a few open trades. Then watch the market and decide where to get out. You don't have to let the VTA manage the whole thing. You'll see maybe a setup is earning you on an average 15 pips on average. Some go more, some go less. And so you're in a trade, you come to your platform and that same setup and it's up 20 something. Now it may go further, but you're over your average, so just take the profit. It's a gift, right? Once you get more confident in your manual trading abilities, it'll be a lot easier because you'll kind of know when a good spot to exit is and that kind of stuff, and you'll know if you can, hey, if you've got opportunities to make up a loss that the VTA made. You'll feel more comfortable running the VTA if you have confidence in your ability to come and find some good setups and make 10, 15 pips to mitigate any losses the VTA might have had the previous session. So all this is going to be something you're going to develop as time goes on, and being in the trade room every day is going to help you kind of develop that, talking to other traders and me and seeing how we do it and all that kind of stuff. I just want to reiterate to stay on demo until you're comfortable using it. Let's go to our settings, and we're going to show you, as I promised, the exact algorithm that the VTA uses to identify trades. Okay, also I'm going to bring up my handy dandy Tiger Trainer. A lot of you guys may have remembered this. Wait, what's going on? Don't worry about the pound yen, we'll use the pound dollar one. This is my old Tiger Trainer from the Tiger Trade Room. So it's orange, but why make a new one? I mean, it works so good. I love it. So we're going to use our mock little grid here. Okay, so here we have, we're going to start with the 1 minute trend. I've gone over some of this stuff already in the beginning, I think masterclass, just going over the VTA alerts and such. Okay, so a lot of it is the same. Start time, obviously, and end time is, I put it at 6:15, and to be honest, I think it's best. You could probably go earlier than 6 though. As long as you're after rollover, I would say 3 or 4 you could do. All my settings right now for most of them have been tested between 6 and 15. Alright, so that's just know that. But I don't see anything wrong with an earlier time. 15 is probably an okay end time because you want to be closed before rollover if you can. You don't want to have an open trade go into rollover, but that's much later than 15. I mean, you could probably get it higher there because rollover is around I'm pretty sure the 23-24 spot. I'm pretty sure that's the GMT time. Risk factor of 1. I mean, the 1 minute trend. This stuff you have to play with. That's just a multiplier based on your power of 20 lot size that's calculated. Oh, and I'm already at advanced settings. We don't need to do that. Let's come up here. I'm sorry. There's 2 types of entries on a 1 minute trend. There's a box entry and a white zone entry. The box entry is simple. It's when the price gets to the 1 minute, boom, that's where it looks for the signal right there. A white zone entry waits till the price floats down to here. Boom, 1 minute white zone. So these actually do well. I haven't put any recent settings out for them, but they've always performed well in the past. Always performed well. That's one thing to try. It's a little more conservative. It's more in line with where the 5 minute entry is going to be, but it's still treated as a 1 minute. So you're going to use, if you're going to use a dynamic entry, you're going to use a 1 minute dynamic entry, or even the white zone is done pretty decent on 1-click type entries because they're pretty much of a bigger pullback. The pattern still has to be there. So you're still going to have that high probability pattern, but you're not going to get in at the box. It's going to wait for the white zone to touch for an entry. So that's the white zone. Right now, all the testing has been with the box entry. All right, so dynamic entry, there's actually a bunch of entry possibilities. All I've been testing so far is the 1-click and the dynamic. Say, for example, all right, we're familiar with these already, I think. 1-click means in your auto trade, when you're using the auto mode, it means as soon as it hits this, it'll be in. If everything's right, if you have the clear roads and the pattern is right, it's going to enter you as soon as it touches the box. Right? A dynamic entry will give you a ready signal when it hits the box and then wait for the proper dynamic parameter. Whatever you put in a 1 minute, it's going to be a 1 minute always. You're not going to wait for a 5 minute candle on a 1 minute trend. It doesn't even make sense. Now breakout, what that does is once it hits your box, it gives you the ready signal and then it waits till it makes a new high in this case. So it'll actually have to break out. The breakout entry is like a breakout trade, but it needs all the exact parameters for a 1 minute trend trade to be in place. All right, so when you get that exact 1 minute trend trade, then it waits for an actual break of the high. So you're not going to get the best entry, but most likely you're going to be on the right direction. So that's worth testing. I'm going to put a whole slew of testing settings out with breakout and stochastic entry. Stochastic entry is when, same thing, when the price hits the box, it gives you a ready signal, but then it enters when the 1 minute stochastic, it'll give you the ready signal when the price hits the 1 minute box like all the others on the box entry, but it waits for the 1 minute stochastic chart to get into the, and if it's a long trade like this, to wait until it gets into the oversold position and then comes out of that oversold position. There are settings you can set this stochastic entry at. Oh, you know what? I used to do it per setup, but I've got just one stochastic now at the bottom. If you go to the bottom, right, it's under the bot switches, which I didn't mean to do that. Here, stochastic settings. So it uses these settings. The K line is a 5, the top is 80, and the bottom is 20. The D is always the same, but you can change how fast the K is if you want. This is only if you know how to use a stochastic. Don't mess with it. These settings work great. I've seen excellent settings. But if you happen to already be an experienced trader and you understand the stochastics well enough to where you have a setting that you like, then here it is. You can manipulate that. Okay? You can build your own strategies with this, but if you're, keep with what it's got if you don't understand it yet, if you're just new starting out. Okay, so those are the entry. Any questions about any of the entry types? Yes, it does. The time is GMT time, so not local time. That's a good question. And it does. See here, it has the GMT, so I did notate that. So that's 0600 GMT, right? And that's 1500 GMT. There's a lot of options for stop losses, okay? Only use the swing stop if you're not using 1-click. I don't have a check in there right now. If you happen to set it so you have 1-click and swing stop, I need to put a little alert to let you know, because what'll happen is it'll stop you out right away. Because if you get the 1-click entry, for example, in other words, so if it's a long, that means price was up here and now it's pulling back, right? If you get the 1-click entry here, chances are you're already at a swing low. So the swing stop will take you out immediately upon entry. The swing stop, it says not for click. I think because it said that, I went right to it. So basically, it'll work for any of the entry types except for one click, okay? Because what happens is on all the other entry types, the dynamic, the stochastic, and the breakout, is you're already, there's going to be a swing low behind you on all those entry types because they wait for price to move in your direction, right? But the one click, the price is moving against you. There will be some situations where the swing stop will not stop you out right away, but in most situations, if it's taken more than 15 candles to pull back from the high, it's going to exit you immediately, and it could get into a situation where it repeats trades, open and shutting them. So that's why it's important that I do put the alert in there and disable the robot if you happen to put these two together, and I will do that. That's a priority. But for now, just be aware. Do not use swing stop if you've got one click entry on there. Okay, use the other ones. In fact, the swing stop will give you a very tight stop. In fact, at first it might be too tight for most of you guys. It will give you a lot of losses, but if you put a target big enough, 20 pips or more, the risk reward will be good. So to be honest, to start out, maybe just start with the L7 and then work your way in. Try the L4 if you think L7's not working. It's too big. But again, like I said, the results that I've showed you guys, the ones that are doing the best, is L7 stop. All right, so it just means you're going to have to take some larger hits every now and then. And what you can do is, I recommend, kind of a little aside, is set your power of 20 settings. I'll just take a second to do that real quick. With the robot, I think it's a good idea. You see how it's 20 pips equals 2%? Is to set 20 pips equal to 1%. Right? Cut your risk in half, because then a 20 pip loss won't be the end of the day. It'll only be half of your day. And the robot will take enough trades where, if you've got your target set right, you'll wake up to a 30-40 pip profit trade often. The robot can do that. It's harder to do that on manual because it's really hard to sit a few hours watching trades go up and down. All right, so I suggest also maybe at the start reducing your risk percentage, because it's going to take a lot more trades depending on how strict you set your settings. For the 1 minute trend trade, all right, so here's your stops. There's a white zone stop. That's a pretty tight stop, but that's basically, so if this was short, the white zone, see where the white zone is? That's your stop loss. So in this case, wherever we entered, the white zone can be a stop. You see, it's in some cases it'll be in front of the L3. See, some cases it'll be behind the L3. So you can kind of see where it goes, and you notice in a trend the white zone keeps expanding, so it's kind of like a trail. Like here, the stop was around here, and then boom, it bopped down to here, right? As long as that keeps expanding, that'll keep happening. So that's one thing to keep in mind. You can use that as a stop. That can be a nice little stop loss in a momentum trade. All right, so that was the white zone stop. I'm gonna just make this platform a little smaller. Oh, that's as small as it'll let me go. That way I can use the trainer at the same time and also have access to charts and stuff to show you guys. So in fact, why don't I just put a chart up here so I can use it when I need to. It won't give us a signal, even though that looks like it's going to give us a signal soon. It might just be, oh, it might be too late. GMT hour is 15 right now. You can always check the GMT time by just refreshing your template. And look, when it shows you your active bots, it'll tell you a few things. It'll tell you the version, then it'll list you what bots are active. And then it'll give you your GMT time. Okay, so you can always check your GMT time at any time. All right, so it won't open a trade now because remember, I have the cutoff time at 15. That was the white zone stop. Now there's a 5-minute box stop, obviously, if you look at the trainer. So if it enters at the 1 minute box, that'll mean the 5-minute box is the stop loss if it breaks below that. What is a break? Pretty much right now in the VTA, a break is anything that breaks a level by 3 pips. do we need to go over these things again? It's just the trade will operate according to these. I've gone over, I'm pretty sure these, but again, you're given 3 versions of each. You have 3 protectors, 3 scale outs, and 3 trail stops. I used to have each setup had its own setup like this. Its own trade protector, its own scale out, its own trail stop. I used to have it that way. It just made the settings panel so large. But I mean, if we find out that you guys want that kind of flexibility, let me know. I'm at least considering having the manual trade have its own setup and then give all the other setups 3 to work with, because I've noticed that I've had to kind of hijack 3 and make it act funny to use it. So I'm thinking on maybe just giving it the manual trade its own set of scale outs and trailing stops, and then but right now you got 3, so you just assign it to 1, and then your settings are down below. Here it is, trade management settings. So your scale out 1, here's your settings. You scale out your trail stop 1 and 2, 3, and your trade protector. So just assign it to one of those, and then it will operate according to that. Let's get into some of the advanced settings. I think we've talked about risk factor, enable dynamic targets. Just keep that to true. There's no reason to put that to false, dynamic targets. All right, so this right here is, these work together. All right, minimum profit pips for target 10, and minimum roadblocks for target 3. So say you've entered this 1 minute trend at 64. In this case, it's going to look for the next 3 column roadblock after you've made 10 pips of profit. So in this case, after 74, it'll look for it, and sure enough, there's a 3 column roadblock right there. Boom. So it would take you out and maybe get you 12 to 13 pips. Okay, it wouldn't get you the 10 in that case, and it wouldn't get you, whatever your target is set to up here. Now, so that's that. You can set this to anything you want. Right now, the one that's doing the best, these are the settings for the one that's doing the best right now, except that it's 1 click, actually. Okay, that's the settings for the one that's been doing the best so far, just like this. All right. Defense target pips, okay, so defense is right here. So basically all it is, it's very simple. In the case of the 1 minute trend, is if the 1 falls below the 2. All right, so say, price is down here, floating while, so you're a little negative, right? And in that process, boom, the 1 minute L1 falls below the L2. See that? So now the L1 is below the L2. Now this thing just went into defense mode on a 1 minute trend, and the next time it goes to whatever you have this set to, I put it at 5. Next time it gets plus 5, say, and the 1 is below the 2, it's going to take you out. Now if it goes slow, and say it's only at plus 2, plus 3, and in the meantime the L1 moves back above, sorry, this thing is really sensitive, goodness, then in that case it'll keep you in, and then it'll just stay like normal. But if you're at plus 5 and the L1 is crossed below, in this case it'll take you out. The defense, and that's the only parameter for defense it takes. And I could put the collapsing white zone as also a parameter, but I think that the L1 L2 has performed just fine. I don't want to have too many reasons to take you out early, because what you'll find out is if you get a lot of trades that take you out at defense, because some of those would still work. Some of those, of all the ones that take you out in defense, there's a percentage that work. And if you've got good risk to reward, then sometimes it's better just to let it work. In fact, I've got a lot of the best settings have some of these trade management things in them that take them out for a few pips, and I think that's good, especially if you're trading manually and you're just trying to get 20. Anytime you can scrape together pips to get 20, that's what you're trying to do. But for long-term risk to reward, that does hurt it. So I'm going to be running settings that are just pure looking for targets and stops and nothing else soon. 1 minute trend there. Okay, so dynamic stops, another one that you just really want to just keep set to true. All right, the L2 trail stop, this is interesting. It takes a lot of trades out early also. The L2 trail stop means it only works once you're in the trade positive. Once you're in the trade positive, it'll take you out at an L2. All right, so it's like the first sign that it's breaking. And so that can work out good. I mean, it's a trailing stop, so that you can see where the stop has trailed this trade the whole time, basically. And as soon as it breaks out, it would have gotten out at 3 pips above the L2. So that's what an L2 trail stop is. I've pretty much activated it on everything. I'm going to run some settings without it. I think it has protected a lot of trades. Like, for example, this one. It would have prevented a whole bunch of loss. But it waits till the thing goes positive before it does it. And it doesn't just wait for your trade to go positive. It waits for the L2 to get out into positive territory to make sure that the break below the L2 will be a positive pip total. So it won't start doing it unless it can take it out at a positive. It won't do it. If the L2 is negative, the L2 trail stop won't work. Okay, it's actually meant to be something that protects a positive trade. So that's basically the idea of the L2 trail stop. Minimum, I think we've talked about the white zone phases. I mean, the minimum is always a 1 on the 1 minute trend. And I think for all the trends, they're going to have to be, you're never going to get an entry with a white zone phase of 0. And max is, I think 3 is good for a 1 minute trend. Now, clear lanes is just simply how many clear lanes do you need? So in this case, it's saying for an entry, we need 3 clear lanes of at least 15 pips. It's going to need that 3 clear lanes. So here's the thing. It's not really looking at it can look at the 1 minute. All right, because for a brief second on your trade, there will be a time where this 1 minute will count as a free lane. But as soon as the price drops below the 1 minute box and it's looking for clear lanes, then usually it's not going to be able to count that because it's got an L1 in front of it. Keep in mind, looking for 4 clear lanes is rarely going to happen. I mean, I did put a new setting in there, this right here, and I'll show you how this works. This is a new setting. How near to 1 minute box? Okay, so that comes into play here. It needs 3 clear lanes of 15 pips. So near to 1 minute box means, in this case, it's 2. So at 64, it'll start looking. And I want to show you how to play this in a second, but for right now, just how it works is if you put 2, then at 64, it'll start looking for the clear road. So in this case, you could put 4 clear roads of something. And then it'll start looking, and it'll give you 2 pips to find that. If it falls below the L1, it will not. If you put 4 clear roads of anything, you will not get any signals below the L1. So it means it has to be right before it hits the 1 minute box. All right, and that's fine because say you have a dynamic entry, that's fine. As long as it gets you the ready signal, then it can pull back and look for the dynamic entry. That's fine. But to get that ready signal, if you put this near pips at 2 or 1, then yeah, you can put 4 clear lanes of something, 4 of 10, 4, and that'll work. If you're going to use one-click entry, I would say you don't really have a low number here because it's going to enter right away. But if you've got a dynamic entry, you could experiment with, say, 5 pips away, right? Because it's not going to enter right there. It's just going to start. It's going to say, okay, we have a situation here. All right, now let's wait for a dynamic entry. And it may still pull back a good distance enough for you to get a dynamic entry, or it may not. It may start right there going again. And we all know if you've got really super clear roads, like if you've got 4 clear roads of 20, then you don't need to be right at the box. I mean, anywhere close that you start getting a dynamic candle, it's probably going to work because that means it's really moving. All right, so just to give you an idea, I think with one-click entries, you want to keep this number pretty close, 2 or less, or 3 or less maybe. But that means you're going to get an entry every time you're 3 pips away from your box. You're never going to get an entry that's any kind of pullback entry if you've got a big number here on a one-click entry, unless it's got to pull back far enough to give you your clear roads. If you're using a dynamic entry or some other form of entry that's not one-click, like stochastic or breakout, I say you can go a larger number here, up to even 5 pips or 6, because you may not get that entry. It's just saying there's a valid trade here as soon as we get a turnover in candle. Okay, I hope you get that. Now, the other thing is, unless you're going to be really strict with this and you understand everything I just said, there's really no need to look for 4 clear lanes of something. Unless I mean, maybe there is now with this near pips. This is a new parameter I put in there. So with that said, you could probably put 4 clear lanes, but the old school of thought is, look, it's going to pull back behind your 1 minute boxes probably, and you want it to sometimes, especially if you've got one-click entry. If you've got one-click entry and you wouldn't mind having a little bit of a pullback entry every now and then you're going to want to just use 3 lanes of clear roads. Because say you have 3 of 15, right? Look, at 76, you got to be down at 15 to 71 to get 15 pips from there. Oh, this is at 75, so you got to be at 70 to get 3 clear roads. Well, at 70, I'm sorry, at 60, I'm sorry. So to get 3 clear lanes of 15 pips, as this setting is set to here, 3 clear lanes of 15, here is at 75 is the first, so you would have to be at 70. So if you were at, I'm sorry, I keep saying 70. I meant to say 60. You would have to be at 60. So that's right here, right at the L2. So if you had this set to 4 clear lanes, you wouldn't get that. But at 3, you would get the entry right here, a little bit of a pullback. You see that? Does that make sense to you guys? Because what I'm going to do now, oh, and then the max pips to 20 to 5 minute box. This is how stretched out can the pattern be. I think 25 pips might be a little high, but it seems to be working. These are the exact same settings. I used to have this set to around 20 or 15, but it would miss a lot of high momentum moves. So I'm up to 25. It might be scary to take a trade actually that's the 1 minute box is 25 pips away. So what does that mean? It means this 1 minute box can be 25 pips. So it's at 56. That would be up at 80, 81. So this is, oops, sorry. So this being at 81, and maybe the L2 probably be somewhere around here. Doesn't matter. So that's about as stretched out as this setup would allow a trade to happen. If this gap got any bigger than 25 pips, it's going to consider this a little too stretched out. I know from experience, if it's a stretched out market, a 1 minute trend is likely to come back. But if this thing is moving because of some fundamental reason, this could go for a long time off the 1 minute, and 25 pips is nothing in a big market. So you would miss maybe some big moves. But if you've gotten the trend earlier than that, say you picked it up a little early and you've got a big enough target, then you can be in for the ride. So what I want to do now then, guys, is tell you the algorithm that the VTA looks for. Okay, so it has these settings. Okay, so all this has to be true. So you need the 3, I've told you part of it. It needs 3 clear roads, or it needs as many clear lanes as you set here for as many pips as you set here. It needs that to be true. It needs to be obviously no more than 25 pips gap here. All right, and the price needs to be within, I'll tell you where exactly the price needs to be. The time needs to be here. So what else? Okay, this is after you're in the trade. Okay, so when it's looking for a trade, the white zone phase has to be at least a 1, 2, or 3. Okay, it needs this many clear roads of this many pips with this much gap to the 5 minute box. Now there's also some other things behind the scenes that it looks for, and I'm going to tell you that stuff right now. Okay, the alignment of the grids for a 1 minute trend has to be this. I'm going to go ahead and close this for now. I think we've got everything off of this we need for right now. Okay, so the setup for a 1 minute trend, or for any trend really, that specific time frame, the 1 has to be above the 2, which needs to be above, let me just bring it down a little bit so we can fit it all on one screen. There's the L7. So on the time frame that the trend is, so it's a 1 minute trend, it needs to have the 1 above the 2, and they both need to be above this, or the 1 needs to be above the 2 and needs to be above the L7. Okay, I think if the 2's not yet above the L7, that's okay. But the 1 needs to be above the 2, and the 1 also needs to be above the L7. The 1 and 2 also need to be above the next time frames, L1 and 2, the 5 minute, which also those need to be, the 1 needs to be above the 2. These do not have to be above the L7. They usually are, though. Okay, now both of these boxes, which need to be in order, need to be above the 15-minute boxes, which also need to be in order. So for any trend, the next 2 time frames, the L1 and 2, have to be in the direction of the trade. So you need to have an L1, L2, L1, L2, L1, L2, and they need to be in a stair-step pattern. Also on a 1 minute trend, the L1 needs to be pointing in the up direction. So that's the green line, or if it's a downtrend, in the down direction. So as soon as it starts to curl, and what does that mean? It's a very simple algorithm to determine if it's facing up or facing down. It just looks at the last three values. And if they are successive, higher or lower, then that is the way it's pointing. If it's some kind of mixed, like if the third one to go was high and then the second one was low and the other one's a little higher, that's a flat line. I call that a flat line. So if they're not all three trending in one direction of the last three values of that L1, it's pointing in that direction. But if they're not in one direction, then it's considered flat. All right. So the L1 of a trend of that time frame needs to be pointing in the direction, which means the last three values need to be trending in that direction. Okay, that's the L1. And then the same thing has to be true for the L1 on the 5 minute. So the 5 minute actually has to have been shown that it's moving in that direction. So in other words, if they start to curl a little bit, maybe the L1's above the 2, but they start to curl against, it doesn't give you a signal. It waits. It's not going to take a signal. It's only going to take a signal that's working like it should. Now, if it curls, say it comes up, say the trade gives you the signal because everything's right. The one's below the 2, the one's above the 2, the one's above the 2. These two are both pointing up. Your white zone is right, and you have it on dynamic entry, so it says ready. Now waiting for a dynamic entry. If while waiting for that dynamic entry, it curls, that's okay. We're not going to cancel every trade just because it pulls back a little bit. As long as everything looked right when it hit, that's what it takes. Through the course of that, while waiting for a dynamic entry, or if you have it on white zone entry. In fact, for a white zone entry, I've canceled the requirement for the L1 to be pointing up, because if you get a pullback to the white zone, it's not, and you're not going to get the ready signal because the one will have pulled back a little bit. Okay, so for a white zone entry, that requirement is not there. The L1 still has to be above the 2, but it doesn't have to be pointing in the up direction. All right, but for a box entry, it does. Okay, so also one more requirement is that out of the 3 time frames that we have alignment of, out of those 3, at least one of them has to be expanding. 1 minute trends, as long as you have one of these 3 time frames with an expanded white zone, then you're good. So that's the requirement. So it requires one white zone expansion on one of these 3 time frames. All right, now let's see, is there any other thing? No, that is everything, guys. That is the algorithm. Okay, so L1 above the L2 on the 3 time frames, on its own time frame and the next 2. So you'll see, we'll talk a little about the 5 minute frame, but the 5 minute trend requires the 15 and the hour to be in order, stair-step pattern, and then one of those 3 white zones expanding. All right, starting to make sense. And the 15 is the same way. It actually requires the 240 lane, all right, to be in accordance. And you don't have to see your 240. It knows where all the 240 levels are. Okay, so the 240's got to be right for a 15-minute trend. Any questions so far? So now you can kind of know when you're looking, say you're trading something manually, and you're saying, hey, I wonder why I'm not getting an alert for this. If you know the algorithm, you see, okay, all right, the 15-minute hasn't crossed yet. Or maybe the 5-minute boxes are not above the 15-minute boxes just yet. And then the other thing the robot does not do that you get an advantage of is manual trading is look at your sidecars. So it can't look at your sidecars and see if they're at support or resistance. That's one issue, that it cannot do, that your manual trading can really play a part in. So maybe it looks good, but your sidecars don't look good. As a manual trader, you can say, no, I don't want to do that one. And by the way, if you have dynamic entry or any type of entry that gives you a ready signal on your grid, you can always swipe that alert if there's something about it you don't like. So say it gives you a 1-minute trend, but you think it's a little late, or the sidecars don't look right, or just something doesn't feel right, or maybe news is coming up and you're like, you don't want to risk it, or maybe rollover or something. You can swipe. Anytime it says ready, you can swipe, and it'll swipe all ready signals, and it'll give you a clean grid, and it won't give you another one unless the setup shows itself again. What I want to do now is show you some of the settings. I'm going to start with this setting that we had here. It's the 1 minute trend. Alright, so for this setting right here, this is the results for that. Now, it's up. It's not up as high as it was at one point. We've hit a little rough patch. It's still up, doing good, 278 pips. This has an L7 stop. Alright, so it's a big stop. It's hitting 69% of its longs, 66% of the shorts. See, what I don't like about it is this risk reward here. See, the loss is bigger than the average win, and that is really a function of the defense. It looks for a 3-column roadblock after 10 pips. So it found one at 20 pips here on pound yen, a 3-column roadblock. And a lot of these, if it's not 5, like say it's 7.5 or something above the defense, that was the L2 stop that kicked in at that point. So it can either, this is going to take us out a couple ways. It'll either take us out by hitting our target or our stop, or it's going to take us out by playing defense at a +5, or it's going to take us out at an L2 trail stop. Because that's all I've got set. I don't have a trade protector scale out or a normal trail stop. We do have the L2 trail stop, and we have the playing defense at 5 pips. So we know if it's a 5 pip win, that's defense. And if it's anything less than, or actually, you know what, if it's over 10 at all, it could be our 3-column roadblock, or it could be the L2 stop. I mean, if we look at our experts tab, it'll tell us what it was, right? But just looking at my FX book, I can't see what it was. That's the thing. Now, how many of these L2s would have gone, how many of these defenses would have worked out for some good pips? I don't know. That's something to be tested. But you see, sometimes the stops, here's a -25. If it happens pretty fast, probably it was a somewhat, yeah, that was less than, 40 minutes it pulled back. So it's going to have a little bit bigger stop, and it was probably after a big move. Here's -15, -30. So this could happen. So for that reason, you may not want to have 20 pips equals 2%. Maybe you want to have 20 pips equals 1%. If you need help with that, I will help you. If you want to know, hey, how do I make 30 pips equal 2%? Well, you just said it that way in your power at 20. Okay. So if I click here, we can just look at some of these trades. It has potential to do 100. Now, I've showed you a lot of this already, but you can see a lot of them are going to be either defense or L2 trail stops. See, a lot of these are L2. If they're between 5 and 10, it's definitely an L2 trail stop. So that's two things that are bringing our average way down, and it's relying on these really big moves to get our pip totals up there. So if you have a setup that you like, it's performing well, but not a lot of entries. And this conversation is going to come really into play with the reversal setup, because the reversal trade is a prime example of this, where it's hitting like 80% of the trades, and it's getting like it's getting a lot of pips, averaging like 20 pips or whatever per trade. And you want to get more setups, you want more entries. So you can make certain tweaks to it. So for example, say we like this setup and it's doing well, okay? So we want to try to get more entries. Say we don't think we're getting enough entries, because what you could do is slightly tweak settings. There's a few ways to get more trades. One is we could make the requirements less strict. We could reduce the number of pips required for an entry. So we could do this to 3 clear lanes of 10 pips. Right? You will get a ton more entries that way. Right? So what you can do is, but of course, since the roads aren't as clear, you can expect either less profit per trade or a lower percentage of wins. One of the things that you're going to see perfectly is with the reversal trade once we get into that, because that is a prime example. I've got this pattern so stretched out that it only gets an entry once a week or something, and it's works really well. So if I reduce the requirements, you will get more trades per week, and hopefully very similar performance. Another thing you could do is, I mean, really, it's the clear lanes and the number of pips on this one. So obviously, only requiring 2 clear lanes of 15 pips or any number of pips is going to get you a lot more trades than if 3 clear lanes are required. In fact, this is the fastest way to get more trades, is change the number of lanes required. You know, you can change the pips. Still, a lot of things are going to have to be very similar, right? But if you change the number of lanes required, you're going to get a ton more entries. Okay, so I've flirted with, say three lanes of 15 are doing good, right? If you straight up want more entries, maybe change it to 2. But what you could also do is maybe raise the pip total a little bit, because normally when you're getting 3 of 15, you're probably getting 2 of 20 and 1 of 16. Or, you know what I mean? They're not all exactly 15 with a 3-column roadblock above it. A lot of times you got 2 super clear lanes and it's just 1 roadblock that's blocking you. You know, it's only like 10 away, but 2 of them are 20 or plus. But you're thinking, man, this would be a good entry. Well, if I had 2 of, say, 20, and I haven't tested this yet, so say 2 clear lanes of 20, would you get more entries on that than you would 3 of 15? So you have to look at it like that. What you don't want is having a 2-column roadblock right in front of you, and then maybe your 15 and 60 is clear. But so there's a lot of, you can tweak it in a lot of different ways to increase your number of trades or signals. If you're just doing alerts, maybe you want to make it less strict, and then you're the final decider, right? Because you're getting that alert anyway. So if you're getting the alert, maybe you make it less strict so you can make the decision on each one. But if you got the VTA running auto, you might want to make it a little more strict, because it's going to be able to find those throughout the day. It's going to be able to find those setups. So being more strict is okay, because you'll still get trades. All right, so that's the balance you want to play. If you look at the 5-minute trends, you have all the same setups, right? All the way, the stop losses are the same. Oh, I never did tell you what the group stop was. I'm sorry. Let's talk about that for just a quick second. I didn't tell you what the group stop was, which I think is a really cool stop loss. Sometimes, you have these levels that you really like, but in some situations, they don't line up perfectly the way you want them to. And that's what the group stop is. So the group stop is, it takes 3 levels. It takes the L3, the white zone top, and the 5-minute box. So it's a way to keep a pretty tight stop. So say in this case, you're in the 1 minute. Now, notice what your stops are, your options. You got an L3, L4, L5, you got a white zone, you got a 5-minute box. So the L3, the white zone, and the 5-minute box all tend to congregate around the same area often. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes one will come and really mess you up because it'll be too close to the price and it takes you out. So it's hard to pick one that works every time. But the group stop, what it does is it makes sure that all 3 are broken before it stops you out. So it makes sure you've broken a combination of the L3, the white zone, and the 5-minute box. Because sometimes one's a little too close and you really want to give that other one a chance. So it makes it break all of them. Sometimes it's still a pretty tight stop. It's never, usually, like in this case, right now, if this 1-minute trend was taken around this level, it wouldn't stop out. It's not above the white zone yet, but it's already broken the 5-minute box. It's broken the L3. It just has to break the white zone, and now it'll definitely be out. So it kind of gives you the trade a few chances without extending the stop loss greatly. Okay, so the group stop is cool. Just as a reminder, if you use the group stop, that means on a 1-minute trend, it's going to use a combination of the L3, the pink line, the white zone, and the 5-minute box, all as your stop loss. All right, guys, so I'll leave it at that for this first trend bot. We'll call it the 1-minute trend bot masterclass. All right, traders, have a good one. Take care, guys.